Hey guys, and welcome back to Undaunted Pursuit podcast. We have another guest this week, and we pre-recorded it. I'm shooting this intro currently in Idaho on my phone. So I didn't get to the opportunity to do this intro with Marshall or before the podcast, but this week we have Ashes 613, or her name is Grace Barker. Ashes 613 is her podcast, and we are excited to have her on. We've been trying to get her on for quite a while now, and due to technical difficulties, and you know how we are with technology, we finally were able to get her on, and scheduling conflicts and such. But either way, it was a great discussion, and we look forward to you guys tuning in and hearing this. So let's get into it, and I'll see you on the other side. This is Undaunted Pursuit Podcast.
You know who made it.
Up is where we're going, and we want you to come with us. There we go. Now we're going. Plus, I wanted to see what it was going to be like, having troubles the last time we tried to do this. But we've had several guests on since you that have worked great.
Okay.
So
Perfect. Got the kinks worked out. All right.
Mm-hmm.
That is perfect.
Yeah, there was a lot of kinks. But let me introduce you real quick. Guys, welcome back to Undaunted Pursuit podcast. We're glad you joined us this week. And we have a very special guest that we have tried having on here before, but it didn't work out because the internet was really bad. But hopefully tonight will be much better. Ms. Parker, I don't know exactly what you want. Isabella or Grace, do you want to go by?
My friends call me Grace. Most
Grace,
people call me
okay.
Grace.
Okay, Grace, we're glad to have you on here, and you run a podcast called Ashes 613.
Yes.
Did I get that right? Perfect.
That's right. Yeah, you got that right.
Cool. Well, we're tickled to have you on here finally.
Okay, I'm glad to be back. We had some internet problems, some scheduling conflicts, and a myriad of other things, but here we are all together.
Finally.
Finally, I know. And almost not. I was on, you're not going to believe this, because we just spoke by text last night. That was like 6:30, 7 o'clock last night. Well, this is where my mind is at. It's just so full. Today is I'm not working. I'm being lazy. I'm laying on the couch. I was in my pajamas. I had actually sang my sleep song. I've been in the kitchen singing my sleep song. Like, today's my sleep day. I'm not going to do anything today. It's my sleep day. And I was laying on the couch in my pajamas, and I get this notification. You have an email that somebody has invited you to a podcast, your Zencaster. In my mind, I was like so confused. Like, oh no, do I have one scheduled? Oh, it's my turn. And so I jumped up and slung some makeup on. So I'm here. But how crazy is that I have less than a 24-hour turnaround in my brain? Like,
I know it. Well, I mean, when you're as busy as we all are, it's easy to, just like we were going to have you on, I don't know, Marshall, how many weeks ago was that?
It's been a couple months.
Grace, how many weeks ago was that? Well, no, it's not a couple months, but we were going to have you on, and then I completely forgot that. Well, of course, you can't plan when you have a funeral, so I completely forgot about that, but it worked
happens.
out.
Yeah.
You what I did see on your podcast was you gave, shoot, I'm all over the place. I got a few questions for you. Okay. You run a podcast interviewing Christian indie artists for the most part, correct?
For the most part, yes.
I did see actually just before getting on, and I didn't answer his phone call. So if he listens to this podcast, Aaron Justice, I'm sorry that I didn't answer your phone call, but I was doing this podcast. So I saw that you had Aaron Justice on your podcast. I was like, oh, sweet. We know that guy,
Has been one of my all-time favorite guests. Don't tell my other guests, but Aaron Justice was one of my all-time favorite, because the talent on this guy is,
I know,
I'm blown away. I mean, the talent and the humbleness. He's so humble. He's so kind, but his talent, I mean, everybody's talented, and everybody brings something to the table. But I,
Mm-hmm.
have only been just completely blown out of the water by a couple people, and Aaron Justice was one of them. And so I'm looking forward to what God is doing, like in his ministry and with his music. Like I'm already an Aaron Justice fan.
We had we were supposed to have him on, and there was a scheduling conflict, just a lot like what we've had. Trying to get you back on here is just he completely forgot. I think the day that he was supposed to be on, I was out at some sort of festival, and I was like, "Dude, I'm sorry, I forgot about it." He's like, "That's okay, I forgot about our podcast too." And but now what we're working with him on is I was trying to talk to him about trying our church is doing a Jesus Fest in lieu of Halloween. And so I was going to try and get him to come down and do a live show here in Nashville, Arkansas.
Yes.
So
Yes. That'd be awesome.
by the
Yeah.
sound of it, it sounds worth it. Well, I mean, we use his music on the podcast, so we know how
Mm-hmm.
good he
Yeah.
actually is. So,
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd say that'd be awesome. So, a Jesus Fest in lieu of Halloween. That's awesome too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something a little different. And we're talking to a few different artists about trying to get them out here and do it. So we'll see how it turns out. Of course, nothing is cheap.
Yeah, no, but I've had some good ones on. So if you need some indie artists, just scope back over, and
Okay.
I've got a few good ones. Really, I mean, they're all good, but a few really good ones on there.
Yeah.
And I have a backlog that I'm working with that I'm probably not working quickly enough, to get those out, and I feel really bad about that. But when you just have so much on your plate,
Hmm.
it just becomes. But we've got some good ones that aren't even on the podcast yet. So they've been recorded though. So what kind of backlog are you working with? Like, what's your turnaround time, just from one podcaster to another? What's your turnaround time like when you record something? When do you air that?
Normally here lately, since we've been so busy this summer, and it's been every 2 weeks. So this episode will air the same week that we're recording in.
So you're
So
just
I
putting me completely to shame right now.
it makes Marshall a little jealous too. But I say that and I don't, because things are a little different this week. I am flying out west to help on some wildfires this week, and because I drive, my full time job is I drive a propane truck, and I also, before this, I was before moving to Arkansas, I was driving a fuel truck. Well, my old boss contacted me, said he needed some help out there on the wildfires, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll come out." It was he offered to fly me out, so I was like, "Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I'll come out." And so it may be early part of next week that this comes out, but our turnaround is generally we'll record, and then I sometime throughout the week have time to get it edited and mixed out and put out that week.
Well, you're amazing. So you're amazing. So you're my new hero. I'm going to aspire to be like you.
Thank you.
I'm going to aspire to be like you.
It makes Marshall jealous because I sometimes, especially in the summertime, I have a little bit more free time, or I've adjusted my schedule at work enough to where I can do that, and I try and take weekends off completely from
Yeah.
podcasts and anything else, and so I try and dedicate the weekends to the family. And
Yeah, I'm not so sure that he's adjusting
good.
his
That's a
schedule
good thing to
more
do.
than it is he's just not that busy at work. So he has time to do the podcast. Just kidding. No, better him than me because he knows more about it than I do. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think my turnaround used to be faster until my plate got fuller, and then my turnaround has just slowed and slowed. But I'm really ashamed, and that's horrible. It's awful. I'm going to make time. I'm going to get one out this week. That's my
good.
promise. It's going to be a new one this week.
I put a heavy emphasis on, and Marshall, you can chime in too if you want, but because he's heard me go back and forth, so man, we got to get one out this week. We got to get one out this week. Yeah, it's a heavy emphasis on trying to keep content coming out. I mean, and this is our ministry, and I've taken on a few other things. I do our church's podcast too. So
Okay.
I edit that and put that
Yeah,
out
he
there.
does get that out pretty
Gotcha.
quick, and he's good about doing that. But in the same token, sometimes trying to it's easy to worry about getting those podcasts edited and then getting them out that same week or maybe the next week. And oftentimes I'm the guy who's like, don't worry about it. It'll come out when we're able to get it out, because I watch a lot of different people in social media, YouTube and stuff, and some of them they turn stuff over weekly videos, like a lot of editing, a lot more than what we do. But there's some
Mm,
people who are turning stuff out. It may be a month, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It just all depends before you see something else. And so, it's just like you've got your followers, you got your listeners. They're still going to be there when you come back. Yeah, it is important to get this stuff out as quick as we can, because, like
Right.
you said, it's a ministry. So we're trying to feed the people as much as we can. But we've also got normal lives outside of a podcast, so we've got other things to do other than just a podcast. So I think people understand.
Right.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
And as far as guests and stuff, we fly by the seat of our pants on here. It's whoever we can get on here. Lately, we've been having a
Yeah.
lot of guests on, so it's been
Mm-hmm.
quite the ride.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. So how do you get your, I'm sorry.
No, you're
I'm
fine.
sorry. Look at me. I'm
Go
going to
for it.
ask questions because
for
that's
it.
what I'm used to doing. And then I
Hey.
have to be like, oh, wait.
This
Oh,
is
wait,
this
it's
is a
not my
collaboration here.
podcast. Right. So how do you get your, I mean, I could just use this one too. Like, hey, next on the podcast, Undaunted
Sure.
Pursuit. So how do you get your guests? Like, how do you come across them?
Messaging them, social
I mean, do you
media.
just like randomly upon them on social media, or do you like have in your mind, like, hey, I like that person, I'll reach out to them?
Yeah. Well, and then of course we have several of our guests, like their publicists or their what's the other
Managers
word
or whatever?
for
Agent, manager.
agents? Yeah, their managers or agents have reached out to us. We're getting ready to, after I read the book, and Marshall, you haven't heard this yet either. We're getting ready to have Strawn Coleman back on. He's an author. He's a Christian author. And you did hear that, but I just got the book in the other day. They sent me a book to read, his newest book, and I've got to read through it. And I told his publicist to just give me some time to read it first before having them on. But other than that, if it's somebody that we really want, there's no harm in asking. We've reached out to some big names, and of course,
I have.
I've seen.
I have too, and I think
No, go
that's
ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. Go ahead. I was agreeing with that. Me too. I've reached out to some huge names, and there's blue lights driving me nuts. And all they can do is say no. And I think that's the beauty of like what you guys probably are and what I am. And I'm not afraid to be told no. It doesn't hurt my feelings. Or even if you ignore me, I'm still going to ask.
No, there's plenty of times I've reached out to people just on Facebook or Instagram. I'll see a video. Maybe it's somebody I've been following for a while, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna just message these guys and see if they'll respond. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. It's like Aaron said, it just doesn't matter. Like, yeah, they're gonna say no. And the bigger names, they're gonna be hard to get a hold of. You've got to usually email them or call their management company and talk to them. I've dealt with that before many years ago. And sometimes they don't have time for you, and sometimes they might be able to pencil in a few minutes for you. It just all depends.
Well, I had reached out to Nolan Taylor, saying that he's an Appalachian artist, I think, and musician. He's amazing. You go listen to Nolan Taylor. He's absolutely amazing. He sings this song called 68 that he's singing my childhood. I swear. The first time I heard it, I cried, and then I listened again, and I stood in my kitchen and cried because I was raised in Appalachia and a child with a lot of Appalachian childhood abuse. And if you don't, people don't know about Appalachian childhood abuse. That's a real thing. And it's a culture that, that's just something we don't talk about, and it just happens. But I had reached out to him, and he said, yes, I would love to do it. Reach out to my manager. Here's their email. And I emailed the management company and haven't heard back from them. But I was so excited that he responded, but then it never came to fruition.
Oh, well, we have a similar story with Disciple. We were going to have Disciple on here, and I was talking I was talking to them, and heck, I even met them at Winter Jam, and they remembered who I was and everything like that. But their schedule is just so busy, we couldn't get them on. But you should see the. It was a colorful message to Rhett Walker that I sent him. It was like, "Hey, since you won't come out with any new podcasts, why don't you be on our podcast?"
Yes.
I never got a response.
Well, I mean, we do what we got to do. And I will tell you this. When I started this podcast, I started messaging people that I remembered were Christian artists that they had kind of dropped off the face of the earth. Like, for instance, Kim Hill, Kathy Tricoli, Margaret Becker. One of the people I messaged was Rita Springer, and never heard back from her. Asked her a couple of times, never heard back. And then all of a sudden, Rita Springer has a podcast now. She started one. And I was like, well, I mean, that's a great idea, but you could have came on mine too, because now she's able to get, because she has more connections. I saw she had on, who wrote, Corey Asbury, wrote Reckless Love. She had him on. And I watched it. It was a great podcast, and I enjoyed listening to his story about that song and some stuff in his personal life. But I can't say that I wasn't a little bit envious. I want to have Corey, but it's okay. We're all doing what we have to do, and God is opening doors and just giving us the grace to walk through and to minister. My podcast, more than it hasn't made me any money, certainly hasn't made me famous, but that wasn't why I started it. Right. But it has allowed me to have so many God connections like this right here, like you two. I mean, just these amazing God connections that are all interweaving. And that's better than money and fame to me, to meet people who are essentially, we're family, right? We're bound by the blood of Jesus. Absolutely. We're family.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
Yep. So I'm going to ask a question here this time. How did Ashes 613 come? How did you come up with the name, and how did you decide that you wanted to start your podcast?
Okay, here's a good story for you. I was sitting in Ohio, northeastern Iowa at the time. I was living in there, had a house. And I have no idea. And I don't really have a good explanation for this. You just have to have faith to believe, and you have to believe in some spiritual stuff to understand this story. Because I didn't know anything about podcasts. I'm not a podcaster. I don't listen to podcasts. And everybody on my podcast knows that. Like, I had never heard one. I didn't really even understand them. And it was like a Saturday morning, and I was sitting at my kitchen table having my coffee and my devotion time with God. And I was just reading in Isaiah. And I was thinking about Christian indie artists. And I don't know why I was thinking about them. I don't know what had me thinking about them, if I had seen somebody. But I thought, wouldn't it be really cool if there was some kind of way to get these people out there K-Love is never going to play, some of the people I've had on. Wouldn't that be really cool? And I just felt the Holy Spirit say, why don't you start a podcast and have these indie artists on, just for Christian indie artists and musicians? And he asked me to call it, God named this podcast. It is after Isaiah 61:3, which says he will bestow upon them a crown of beauty for ashes.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And the Holy Spirit said, call it Ashes 613. And I was like, I didn't know. I had to go look. He said, and I know people think I'm kooky, but that's actually a true story about this podcast. So I know I was supposed to do it. God asked me to do it, and even told me what to call it. And I thought, well, okay. And I, right then, that Saturday, as I was drinking coffee, just started messaging people on Facebook saying, hey, I'm going to start this podcast called Ashes 613 for Christian indie artists and musicians. Would you like to be on it? And just got an overwhelming response with that. And I couldn't believe it. It was almost like, okay, so that was like my confirmation, like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. And having never listened to a podcast. I had no idea. And I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. And I said to all my kids are grown. I have some adult kids. And I said to one of them, I guess maybe I need to listen to some podcasts so I know what to do. And he said, no, I think you shouldn't. I think you should just go in and be yourself and just do your thing. So so I thought, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I showed up, and in the first few episodes, people were like, well, this is the best podcast I've ever been on. You're the best podcast host. And I was like, wow, I don't even know what I'm doing. I've never watched a pod. I've never listened to a podcast or watched one. And they were like, well, that's probably why.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it took me forever. And I did watch that Rita Springer thing on YouTube the other day, but I'm not a podcast person. I actually went through a couple of church interviews recently. I'm going to get back into ministry, and went through a few church interviews. And this is a new thing to me, y'all. In this church interview process, one of the things these churches want to know are, what podcasts are you listening to lately? Who's influencing you? And I thought, yes. And I don't have an answer for these people. The same person is influencing me now that has influenced me for 30 years. His name is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. How am I supposed to answer this question? I don't have an answer for these people. What books are you reading? I don't know, the Bible?
Bible? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, I thought, well, okay, maybe I'm not getting that job because I'm not listening to podcasts and reading Christian books. I don't know what the newest Christian book is. So you guys will have to, you might have to slide me in my DM some Christian podcasts and Christian books so I know what's trendy.
I can do that.
Yeah, I need to know what's trendy in the ministry market so I don't blow my next interview.
Aaron's be more than I am.
No, you're okay.
He's more of the reader and more of the podcast listener. I love podcasts. I like listening to podcasts, but during the day with my job, it's hard for me to listen to something that you got to listen to and then do my job. Aaron, I think it's a little bit easier for him because he's driving a truck, so it's easier to drive and listen to something like that and absorb that, so, but Aaron's a guy for that, not me.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, it is all God-centered podcasts that I listen to. I have really stopped listening to, I have a backup of like Joe Rogan and Bear Grease podcast and like Meat Eater podcast and stuff. But for the most part, if I'm listening to sermons or just any other Christian podcast I get turned on to, I listen to thousands of hours of podcasting. And that was one of our problems. That was one of our problems early on was I was starting to kind of take on this, trying to subconsciously copy some of the ones, which is good why you didn't listen to podcasts at the beginning. But then after we started this, I had to start listening to them because I wanted to know how everybody was structuring their podcasts so that we could kind of fit in a little bit. But as you can see, we run a podcast here that is completely laid back. And it's just, we've become really good conversationalists just by doing this podcast. It's awesome.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm at. And people say, what are you going to talk about? And I'm like, I am going to allow this conversation to happen organically. So I don't necessarily send people questions.
You know what I love?
Yep. No, we don't either. As you know,
something I love when you were talking about how God, the Holy Spirit spoke to you and gave you the name of your podcast. I just got to thinking it's so amazing how much God cares about us and the small things. I think oftentimes as Christians, we get to thinking about how we think God just cares about the big things. You see all these big entertainers and big stars and big this and big that happening. And you think sometimes it's easy to get caught off and think, well, God just cares about that. But, hearing you tell your testimony on how God gave you the name for that, for your podcast, it just makes me think how much God really cares about us individually, our lives, and the small things in our lives. I mean, so much as to give us a name for a podcast and say, hey, this is what I want you to do. Like, he just really, really cares about us. And it's so cool to hear that from other people and other podcasters.
Yes. Yeah, he named it. And I'm telling you, that Saturday morning when the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, why don't you start a podcast, was the first time the word podcast had ever even been in my brain.
Yeah.
That is a
I believe
true
it. I believe
story.
it.
Start a what now? Right? We start a what? I can't believe that word just
Yeah.
never. Somebody asked me, like, how have you always wanted to start a podcast? I always wanted to start a podcast. The word podcast had never even entered my field of reality until that Saturday morning. So, but how cool this experience has been. And then we ended up this January, let's talk about this for a second, started a foundation, same name. So I think that's where the Holy Spirit wanted that to go. We call it the Ashes 613 Foundation. And what we are doing is providing no cost and low cost art and music lessons to underprivileged children throughout the southeastern United States.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's so cool.
So see how that's all tying in together. And Renata Riley is on the board, and she was one of my first guests, and she is a chef. So she wasn't even a musician. She's a chef, been on the Food Network a couple times, had multiple restaurants. She's this phenomenal human being is what she is, and has struggled. And it was interesting because the whole podcast is really a faith-based podcast. And Renata is a person of faith, but she struggled with her faith and came onto the podcast and was just transparent about her struggles. And I thought, no, I'm just going to leave that. I'm going to air that. I'm going to leave that because that is a part of a person's faith journey. And that's a part of Christianity. And I'm tired of the church acting like everything is perfect all the time and that nobody struggles. And so I made a conscious decision after her podcast to not edit it too much. I mean, we had some technical difficulties, so you can see that there's some cuts, but just left that in there. And she's turned into just an amazing friend of mine. And that was literally the first time I had ever even met the woman was on that podcast. Like, hey, she said, I'm Renata. And I said, I'm Grace. And so she's on the board. And then, I don't know. Do you know the band All Together United? ATU?
No, I don't think so.
They're an indie band check them out, write down All Together United. And they're out of somewhere in the Midwest, Missouri. Mostly, I think most of them live in Missouri, around the Kansas City area. And they have been around for a little while and had some different music things happening. But I just recently had them on, and they played for me. They didn't sing it live, but they played for me their newest single. Man, these boys are onto something now. That new single is different than the music. It's like they revamped, I think they changed out a couple board members.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I don't know when it's going to come out. It may already be out, but anyway, so they were Chad from All Together United from ATU is also very instrumental in the foundation. And we had talked about even having like a Christian music festival. I'm back in Florida on my farm. So we had talked about having even a music festival. I don't know that will happen or not. It's
been a vision of ours.
Yeah.
Is it really? So see, we all need to come together. That's a vision of Chad. So I just mentioned it on the podcast with ATU, like, hey, I have this big farm. I think that I could have this Ashes 613 music festival, and I could have some big headliners, but we can incorporate a ton of these indie artists. Like, God is sending all these people into my life.
Yep.
And he reached out to me afterwards and said, hey, I'm going to need to talk to you about this music festival thing because that's a dream of mine. So interesting that that's a dream of yours.
And mostly on that indie side of things because, we've mentioned as we're talking here about trying to get the bigger names on here, the Rhett Walker and the Disciple and everything like that. But where it's at is what we like to do and have gone to is searching out these indie artists that are up and coming, that there's so many of them that are so good. Yes. Who is it? Katie Cole or Katie Nicole, great artist, great indie artist. I've got a couple that you need to reach out to. She, I think, is one of them that is, she's phenomenal. Oh my goodness. She sounds so good. I've used her music on one of our episodes. I'll have to go back. I think it's Katie Nicole. All right. Hold on just a second. I understand that this is the beauty of editing a podcast, and I can go in and correct myself. I don't know what the heck I was thinking here when I was either way. Kristen Nicole or Christy Nicole, she's a great singer. But what the actual artist I was thinking of was either Amanda Joy Powell or Melissa Maddie. Either one, all three are great. And so I'm sorry, I just had to interject that correction here. So let's get back into it.
Okay, you'll have to just email me and text me. Yeah,
Yeah.
we should definitely share some people.
But it's trying to get these people out there. Have this huge music venue, or this festival with these lesser known artists, and that's kind of that is kind of our dream.
Yeah,
to be able to do that.
That's my dream too. And I don't necessarily need to have a big name, except just to sell tickets. I thought we might need to have one big headliner at the, just to draw people in so that they can see these. And that's the only reason, I've only reached out to a couple bigger names. And the only reason is my way of thinking is if I could get like a For King and Country to come on, I could get the views and I could get views for these indie artists, and maybe that can help the channel, and I can get these. I have people that need and deserve to be heard. Did you watch the Kimber episode?
I didn't. No, I don't think. No, maybe I did. Maybe that was one of them that I listened to.
Kimber is amazing, and you should maybe have her on. She's also phenomenal. Now she is actually on tour with Petra right now. So
yes, okay, I did listen to that one because I was. That's kind of where we all got our start, was with Petra. And
and Petra has, there's been multiple times that we've kind of toyed around with them coming on the podcast because I've had every one of their opening acts on. Hey, it's okay. Shh, don't do it. So here's what's going on in my life.
Oh man.
Let's see if I can get somebody to come get him. Okay, somebody's going to come handle that.
Okay.
Anyway, but it just never happened. I mean, it was just, scheduling conflicts, mine and theirs, and touring. So maybe, but it may happen one day. I kind of would just, I grew up with Petra, but I would love to have him on, but just mostly too, to wrap up that series because I've had everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. There's somebody that we need to work on together. I think if we go at him united, we use a lot of his music on here. His name is Anthony Morris. He's a kind of, I've never met him, but it kind of befriended him on through messaging and all that, and using his music. And he is a little bit introverted, and he'll tell you that too. But we need to work on him to be on both of these podcasts. If he has more than one person asking him to be on a podcast, he might bite. I don't know.
Let's do it. And you know what? If we can get some of the bigger artists, I don't mind tag teaming. Like if we can get a bigger person together, I don't mind just showing up and we can just both use it. I don't mind doing that. It's a little collab. Yeah. I had reached out to For King and Country and they didn't say no. That was their mistake. They should have just said no to start with, but they didn't. They said, we're busy right now. We're filming this movie. This was back there. And they said, or we would love to, but we're in the middle of making this movie. And I said, okay, so that's not a no. So I am going to ask you again later. And they responded with, yes, please ask us again later. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what you done now?
Shoot. And then they get on the Unashamed podcast.
Yeah, then they get on Unashamed. Yeah.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, those Robertsons. If we can get one of them on here.
They got a bigger.
If we can get one of them on here.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
That would be fantastic. I've been in the entertainment business. I worked in it for a couple of years when I was in Branson, Missouri, and I was a part of a company that did a welcome home event for Vietnam veterans. And I was just a personal assistant to a guy who helped produce shows and all that kind of stuff. But I met a lot of people, a lot of big names. The second year we went to Nashville and we had a publicist, we had a staging company that we worked with, and we had all these people. We met managers of some pretty big country music artists and met a lot of people. But so through that, I gained a lot of experience on how to do a lot of this stuff with, like we're talking about, some sort of an event or a concert or something like that. So I've kind of got some know-how on how to set that stuff up. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work, a lot of planning, money, or people donating stuff, or stuff like that. So there's a lot that goes into it. But Aaron and I have talked about. We've even talked about doing a some sort of, like, not necessarily a festival, but like an event where there's just a bunch of podcasters. They get together at some venue somewhere, and there's just tons and tons of podcasts with a booth set up. Maybe they're running their podcast. Everybody has their podcast going. We just jump around from booth to booth, and we all interview each other. Some sort of event like that, maybe. Yeah, so we've tossed around some ideas, things that we might want to do one day. But I tell you, doing that kind of stuff it's a lot of hard work, but it sure is worth it. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, we better get on that because when this goes out, that gives just somebody else a little bigger bankroll to pull something like that off.
Don't invite us.
Hey, if you're listening to this, what little bit of people are listening to this podcast, if you're listening to this and you decide to do that, at least invite Undaunted Pursuit podcast and Ash's 613 podcast to be at your event. So,
right, that's what I was going to say. At least invite us. That's what I thought about Rita Springer. Geez, at least invite me on. I might just reach out to her and just say, hey, invite me on. I can play guitar. Invite me on. Right.
Yeah.
So, invite us.
It's so funny because your story is so similar to our story, where Undaunted Pursuit podcast came about, because I was running a podcast before this, and we've told this story on the podcast before, but long story short, I had told my wife we were talking about it, and I said, well, I just don't feel called to mission work. And God, I was out working the next day. God kind of hit me with it. It's like, I gave you a mission field. You are called to mission work. You're a believer, right? And your podcast is your mission field. So why don't you stop doing what you're doing and turn this around? Well, 2 or 3 years later, after not listening to that, we started this podcast. And so,
that's amazing. And it is a mission field. I mean, we are called to be the light, just kind of wherever we're at. Light is light in all areas, in every corner. So it's. People don't understand, if you're called to have the light of Jesus, to be the light of the world, you're not turning that on and off. So you are that light wherever you go, whether that's podcasts or mission field or church, or if you're working at Walmart or if you're working at Taco Bell, you could be the light, right? Because somebody needs to see that. Somebody, just one person. People need to see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, even there's millions of podcasts out there right now. And the market is so flooded with podcasts. But like you were saying, Grace, about being the light, and there's these bigger podcasts that people are listening to. Well, there's also listeners that aren't listening to those. And what else are they listening to? So maybe eventually we are reaching some of those fringe groups of people that need to hear this gospel message, that need to hear about Jesus. And so, we may not have the biggest podcast, but we're at least getting some of, we're getting Jesus to somebody.
And we are. And more than that, like I said before, we are all making connections and in unity, how good and how pleasant it is for family to dwell together in unity. In unity, we are making a difference, where maybe we can have some of these like conferences or festivals or a podcast thing or a music thing, or we can collaborate and really make a lot of things happen and make, Jesus doesn't need us to make him famous. He's already famous, but where we can, come alongside that and go, there's still a lot of people in the world that are hurting, that are not going to go to church. They're just not. But they might come across your Undaunted Pursuit or Ash's 613 or any number of smaller podcasts. They may come across those just on social media. And so that's kind of where I'm at with that too.
And I hope they do, because that's kind of the direction we've taken this podcast in a way. You focus on indie artists. We mix it up a bit. We do some biblical, Bible study. And then when we do have guests on especially early on, we were trying to look for these different ministries. You asked earlier how we find our guests. Well, it was a simple Google search as ministries in the U.S. What are some different, extreme sports ministries, outdoor ministries, golfing ministries, or whatever. There's a ministry for everything, and that's the idea. That's the direction that we're going on. This Undaunted Pursuit podcast is to show people that sharing Jesus is fun, that it's not just going to church.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. Yeah. It's not just, it's definitely, a church is a big part of it. And, there's some beautiful churches out there that you can plug in and have a community and have family, but there's more, this is a lifestyle. It's every day. It's 24/7. So yeah, that's awesome.
So you are at, I'm going to change directions a little bit here. You're at your farm now. When we first tried to get you on, you were living in, I don't know if I can say this. Where were you at? Can I say that? You were living in a bus, right?
I was living in a 45-foot long bus. Yes, it was awful. It was the worst experience of my whole life.
What
and I'm glad that I got to do it. Oh, I have excuses. I have things that I say to people. I have very tailored responses to this question. But if the transparent, honest response is, I think I just had a midlife crisis, just to be perfectly honest with you. And I think 2020 just brought it on. During 2020, I was not in the ministry. I had been in children's ministry and teaching and being a director for a private school and been in children's ministry for some number of years. And that had ended, and I had taken a job as the operations director for a service provider company, providing services for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Basically, anybody, your IQ couldn't be over 70. So if your IQ was under 70 in the state of Kentucky, they have these two waiver service, the Michelle P. and the SCL waiver service. And so basically, I was running this company, and we did like case management, community access, community living supports, day centers, adult day centers, and all this kind of stuff. So it was a huge job, huge responsibility, a lot of stress. And then quarantine happened. And so we had these families, and we did this. There's this program called, what's it called? FLP, Family Living Provider.
Okay.
Now I can't remember. But basically, it's like foster care. It's like foster care for these adults with disabilities, right?
Okay.
FHP, Family Home Provider. Okay, so it's like a foster care program.
Yeah.
And basically, you have these foster families. And if you're interested in this, it's a real thing. And this is a calling that God has to call you to do, where you open your home and you basically take care of these adults that have disabilities. But what happens is a bus will pull up at your house at 6:30 in the morning and pick up these people and take them to day center. Okay. And where they do arts and crafts or watch movies or whatever. These people are at day center, your individuals all day. You might get them back at 5:00. So if you are a family home provider, you're essentially, you get your individuals home, and you could have 1, 2, or 3 in your house, and you're feeding them supper and helping them get a shower, and then they're going straight to bed. Then you're getting them up the next morning, putting them on that bus, and you're getting paid really good money to do this, right? So then quarantine happens. Day centers shut down. So now these family home providers have these individuals 24/7. Oh, wow. And they decide, right, we're not doing this because you're not getting paid any more money, same amount of money, and now you're working 24/7, and you have these individuals. And so 3 of these individuals wound up at my house, which was fine. I'm still trying to run this service provider company and taking care of 3 adults with disabilities because I didn't have anywhere else to put them. Luckily, 2 of them I had known for so many years and loved them. And I had a big 5-bedroom house. So I was like, okay, well, I literally, one of my family home providers just drove over on a Sunday evening and just brought this gentleman to my house and said, "Here, take him. You can't stay with me anymore. Here you go." Dropped his stuff on my front porch and drove away. And I was like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. So I had a big 2020 was a different kind of year for me. It's different for everybody, but wow, it was really different for me because these are adults with disabilities, and luckily, we were fine. But that was a population I think that got forgotten during that whole quarantine. It wasn't our company, but there was another service provider company in Kentucky. One of their people murdered her family home provider, stabbed her to death in the bed. Because in this girl's mind, the woman was the reason she couldn't see her boyfriend. See?
Wow.
Because she couldn't ration that in her mind that there was a quarantine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she got it in her mind that this woman's keeping me from my boyfriend, and she murdered her. That happened in Lexington. And so this population got forgotten. But anyway, long story short, I had so much stress for 2 years, all of 20 and all of 2021. I think right at the end of 2021, September, October, it started opening back up, and they let these individuals go to day center. And I got my 3 individuals placed in other people's homes. And then I just had so much stress that the stress of it, and, being, 29 like I am, just took it. It was crazy. Just a whole midlife crisis. And, I wound up on a 45-foot long bus, traveling the country. I thought I needed a season to travel the country. And that's kind of what I thought. I need to travel for a little bit and see some stuff, No, I hated it. I hated every second of that bus. I hated the bunk. I hated the little bus bathroom.
Oh man.
It was
I
awful.
can relate on the bathroom side. We did the same thing in 2020. God put us on the road. We traveled the country with 5 kids, 2 dogs, and a bird, and a 32-foot Fleetwood Bounder motorhome, and we stayed in many parking lots. We we ran out of water in Ohio and in a parking lot, and had to dip water out of the pond that was colored blue with like blue food coloring, and had to use that in our toilet in the RV. So, it was all fun. You call it a midlife crisis. We called it an adventure, and it was a good time.
It was definitely an adventure, but not one I want to repeat. And I had told God, I feel I want to travel maybe at some point in my life, but God's going to have to work that out where there's hotels involved.
Yeah.
Or a bigger bus, or one that I don't have to drive.
So y'all are trying to get away from these buses and these campers.
But
I'm trying to find one so I can go and enjoy it. And if y'all just, toss one of those my way.
You could have just, I mean, back in the earlier first time I met you, you could have just came to Kentucky and got that one, Marshall. I would have rather. Here you go.
Yeah.
Ooh. That was a nightmare.
What was the worst for us was, with all of our kids and everything, was staying stationary. As long as we were on the move, it was great. But when we were stationary for an extended period of time, there was towards the end of 2020, going into 2021, we went back to Idaho and spent the winter in the RV, and that was very difficult. And then we moved here to Arkansas in the RV, lived in the RV from Thanksgiving till probably Christmas, or a little bit before, probably several weeks before Thanksgiving to Christmas. So all in all, we probably lived in that RV for, if you were to add up the time, we probably would have spent probably a couple years in the RV.
God bless you. I made it 4 months, y'all. I made it 4 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was difficult.
It's good to learn things about yourself that you didn't know. So it was a learning experience for me. I learned that I like hotels.
Yeah.
Everybody's on that bus kick. I know.
We've since gotten rid of it, and have considered maybe, when the kids have moved out and we've retired, just getting a boat and then sailing and living on the boat.
and kind of living on the boat. I have a little
We can't
friend.
help ourselves from traveling. I mean, we love traveling.
Get on my Facebook and look on my friends group. There's a guy named Mike Fields, and he lives on a boat. Somebody gave it to him, or he bought it cheap, and he redid it. It's very cute. He's got
Really?
one leg. Yeah, he's only got one leg, and he's over there living on this boat, redoing it. It's so nice. He's done a great job, and he's a musician.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So I don't think he sails. I think it's parked somewhere, docked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
anyway,
shoot.
so I'm not on the bus now. I'm back at my farm. I've never been so happy to be. I just was like thrilled to be back at the farm. Never thought I'd be this happy to be in the Florida Panhandle, but boy, was I ever.
I bet you were.
Yeah.
Did you start that podcast while you were doing that? Living on the bus?
No.
No.
I had started it before. I just got on that bus earlier this year. Got on it, got right back off of it. That was just something I did just for a few months this year.
Okay.
Right on it, right back off of it. Actually, don't think I did a single podcast on the bus. Tried to do yours, and then it didn't work. And then,
Right.
But you know what that bus ended up being for me, and maybe this was the point of it. It was not at all what I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
It was not traveling. It was not fun. I did not like it. But what happened was I crawled in that bunk, and I had a TV in the bunk, and I'm not much of a TV watcher, but because I didn't really have, for the first time in maybe my entire adult life, I didn't have any responsibilities.
Yeah.
I didn't really have any bills because the people living on the farm, it was leased and the people were still here. So they were making, farm payment is enormous, but they were making the farm payment. So I didn't have any huge bills, just small bills. And I didn't have any responsibilities. And so I spent just a few months inside that bunk of that bus. That's what I did, was just lay there and rest and decompress. And I feel like, and that's what I told people. And then of course I hated it. So I was ready to get out of it. But it was maybe the first time in my adult life that I actually rested.
Yeah.
I got so much rest, and there was so much peace. There was peace in there because I wasn't really associating with a whole lot of people. I wasn't necessarily an introvert, but it's kind of a more introverted lifestyle, because you're kind of, just a few people. And so I got so much rest, and I think that my nervous system, because of the quarantine and because of my job and the stress, I think that my nervous system needed that. And I didn't even know that I needed that, but maybe God knew I needed that. And so once I got back down here, got off the bus, I felt like, and I told people this, I feel like I'm coming out of, I'm on the other side of this. I don't know if it was a midlife crisis or just the enormous amount of stress that job placed on me for a couple years, that amount of stress. So I feel like I can see the light. I feel like myself again for the first time in a long, long time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So I think maybe I did need those few months inside that bus, just cuddled up in that bunk like a little, I was like just burrowed down in my little bunk.
Oftentimes God knows what we need right when we need it. And that bus was what you needed right when you needed it, probably.
It was because I needed, And we found there the last couple of months, found this amazing farm in Paintsville, Kentucky. And these were some wonderful Christian people. And they said, you could just park it down there by the creek on our farm. And they had a hookup down there, 50 amp and water and sewer.
Sweet.
And so, exactly. So I spent the last couple of months in that bus down by this creek in Paintsville, Kentucky. And it was quiet. It was so quiet. my dogs, and they lived. It was like a 300-acre farm,
Wow.
y'all. So it was huge.
Wow.
It was plenty, and it was Payne and Vicky Rice. They're in Painesville. Amazing people, and so you could hear the creek running. You could look out the back window of the bus and see the creek running, and it was just that's what I think. So the bus wasn't what I thought it would be. Like things often are not, right?
Right.
But I needed it. I needed it. Yeah.
Well, I've been listening to a lot here lately on just resting. God rested on the seventh day, not because he was tired, but because he was setting an example as to what we need. He knew and knows how busy our world was going to become and how busy our lives and stressful our lives was going to become. So he made this example for us to rest. And we get so caught up in that you almost have to, where was it? What story was that you actually had to pay back? Maybe it was a sermon I was listening to. Anyway, you almost have to make up for that time. You are making up for the time of rest that you have missed, all those Sabbath days that you have missed. And I think it was a preacher talking about, somebody, it was a sermon I was listening to talking about how he finally took that moment of rest and that he actually had to pay back all this time that he didn't rest. So,
You know what? And I had never thought about that because I didn't get a Sabbath for almost 2 years because I had individuals with disability in my home, and I couldn't. Basically for 2 years, the state of Kentucky owned me. They just owned me. I had to adhere to all the policies and procedures. Meanwhile, I'm still working a full-time job and running this service provider company and providing service myself. And so I didn't. So I never thought about that. Maybe God was just like making it all up and giving it all to me at one time. Like, here's your rest. Because I did have to pay, here's your rest. And I needed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm in Florida now. Big time sunshine state down here.
Oh, man. Are you close to water? Are you close to the ocean?
It's like an hour and a half.
Oh.
I mean, it's.
No. When you say farm in Florida,
I
don't
love
really
water.
go together. When someone says, I have a farm in Florida, that's not what I think.
Right.
You think beach when you think of Florida.
Right. I know everybody thinks beach when they're in Florida. No. It's inland. Yeah. It's inland Florida.
North Central.
It's when you see all those like Florida memes online, those are all happening inland. None of those things are happening at the beach because the people at the beach are not Floridians. The people at the beach are people with money that are moving down and retiring, and it's a whole beach culture all around the whole place. But the Florida memes that you see are 100% accurate, and I'm living right in the middle of it.
Oh, man.
I get to see it every day. I'm like, that's just Florida stuff happening. So that's definitely some Florida inland activity. Floridians are like it's like a whole nother race of people. I love them.
Yeah. I can see why.
They're wild. I went by we are close to the Chipola River, but you could look that up. If anybody's listening, probably people know the Chipola, but the bodies of water here, except for the ocean's beautiful and the Gulf is beautiful, but the rest of the bodies of water here are just what you think, just what you see in pictures. They're swampy. They have this green stuff floating on the top, and they have trees that grow right up out of the middle. Okay. Looks it's just like swamp, just like Louisiana. And it's, for a fact, there's gators in there. But you'll just see people with their inner tubes floating around in it like it's no big deal. I just passed at Chipola yesterday, and there were kids, there were children out floating in this. Y'all, I wish I had a picture to show you. If you took a look at it, you would think I wouldn't get in there if somebody paid me to. I wouldn't either. But Florida people just jump on in there. They just get in there and float around, and I don't know. I'm just not. All I could think is gators and water moccasins, and I'm not getting in.
Yeah. Heck, we've got some gators just south of us here. Not too far south of us, about 10, 15, 20 minutes south of where we live.
Gators are moving into Texas too. They're in a lot of these lakes around here. They're becoming more and more prevalent in the lakes around here. So not where I'm at, but you go further east. Of course, East Texas, you'll see them around there. But even in the DFW Metroplex, you're starting to see them more in lakes around there too. So it's not safe anywhere. Yeah.
Okay.
They're taking over, y'all. They're taking over. Well, you're not allowed to, here in Florida, you're not allowed to kill gators at all. Not even on your property. They're protected, which I don't understand because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
You think
Louisiana's got like an open season on them.
And Florida is second only to Louisiana. So I would think Florida would have at least partial open season on those. Now, what we do have is open season on wild boars. You can kill those all the time, anytime. And the iguanas, they have some iguana problems and they will pay you.
I want to come down there. I want to come down there to do that. And our kids want to hunt those iguanas too. I heard they taste really good. I want to eat one.
Really? I have never heard that.
That would be fun. Chasing iguanas.
Huh. Well, come on down.
Let's do it.
We should all just come on down and we'll take the cameras
just
and we'll follow you
fest.
around. We're
coming to your farm.
They'll pay you for it, I heard. And they also pay for I saw a sign that they were paying for rattlesnakes too. Yep. So
really? Yeah.
Yeah, do they?
You got iguanas in your farm?
No, it's a little farther south. I'm too far north for the iguanas.
Okay.
They say that I've heard that when it gets cold in the winter, every once in a while it will accidentally drop below freezing in Florida. Not many times, once a year or something. But what happens is the iguanas freeze and then they fall out of the trees and hit people on the heads. So we get these warnings, like I've gotten them on my phone. You get these warnings, a falling iguana warning, that it's just like the Florida Fish and Wildlife. And what they're telling you is it's no big deal. Don't freak out. Just pick the iguana up and set it over next to the tree base. And when it warms back up,
I'm taking it home.
It'll warm up and skedaddle. But yeah, we get these warnings. That's crazy. We get these fallen iguana warnings.
Cloudy.
Pigs don't fly, but iguanas do in Florida.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what I would do if I was walking around and iguana clomp me on the head. I'm sure I would scream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, shoot. Hey, as we get ready to wrap this up, where can people go and listen to you? Find Ashes 613, and
on any place that you can. That's my little Dalmatian Jack. He is my heart. But he is, y'all know how Dalmatians are.
Oh, yeah.
All the stuff you hear about Dalmatians, like everything textbook, like they're high strung, they need lots of attention and lots of extra. It's all true. All that's true and more. So you have to really, people say like, oh, I want to get a Dalmatian. Would you recommend it? No, the answer is no. Now I wouldn't take $1 million for mine, but you have to really be a dog person and have a lot of patience.
Yeah.
Hang on, and you can edit this out, right? Hang on. Hey, I need help.
No, leave it in there.
Maybe I don't want to edit that out.
There are other people in this house.
Hey, y'all get this dog out of here.
Yeah, I'm like, I swear there's other people in the house somewhere.
On this episode of Undaunted Pursuit and Dalmatians.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. Woo.
Hey, we have our share of interruptions on this thing too. So if you're cool with it, I like leaving this stuff in for comedic relief. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I don't care. I mean, he's a wild one, I'll tell you that. So Ashes 613, the if you want to know about the foundation, if you know somebody that you think could benefit from the foundation, or if you have an extra $5 to throw our way, we could appreciate that too. You can go to ashes613.com. Okay. If you want to listen to the website, geez Louise, if you want to listen to the podcast, you can find that on, I guess, all the major platforms. The Spotify and the Apple and the Pandora. And it's also on YouTube. I think you just type in youtube.com/Ashes613. We'll get you there.
Perfect.
And there's Facebook pages and Instagram pages and TikTok pages. There's social media pages galore.
Good. Yeah, I will put and for all those of you guys listening, I'll put all of those in the show notes as well. So have no fear. You'll be able to just see the show notes, click on the links, and
Yeah.
make sure you go and support Grace and what she's doing. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And if
Grace,
you are an indie artist and a musician and you want to come on the show and
definitely,
play, just message me and let me know. Yeah. I
definitely.
love to get indie artists on and get an acoustic song or two in. That's my favorite thing, is to try to get them to, if I can get somebody to come on and do me an acoustic, I love that.
Michael Lacey, he'll do that for you. Great
Okay.
dude, friend of ours. We went to school with him, Marshall and I, and he is so good. You need he needs to be on your show, and
Okay.
he's recorded a couple of singles, and yeah. So Michael Lacey, and of course the guy that we're using tonight for podcast. I'm gonna plug him real quick. Michael Stokes. He's a local guy from Derrick's, Arkansas. He he's allowed us to use some of his music on our podcast, so we're truly grateful for that. So, of course, any of those of you listening, check that out in the show notes as well. So, enjoy
Yes.
that music. But we use indie artists at the end of this episode, or at the end of our episodes, because here's our thing: what we talk about on our show, if it doesn't strike a chord with somebody, if it doesn't really connect with somebody, music has a really good way of doing that. So that's why we put music at the end of every episode, or most every episode, I say, is
Yeah.
because maybe the music will touch somebody.
That's
If what
right.
we say doesn't,
Yeah.
maybe the music will.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Music has a way of transcending, words.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it does. Where I feel like where words fall short,
Yeah.
music just picks up,
exactly.
and it can just change. I mean, it can. Music is so powerful, it can change your
yeah.
mood, like bam, just like that. So,
Yep.
well, you guys are incredible, and I love you guys.
Thank
I'm
you.
so happy to be here.
I'm glad
So-
we were able to do this. Thank you for being on.
Yeah. You're welcome, and thanks for having me. And this is the beginning of a long friendship.
Absolutely.
We're
I
going to
sure
do some
hope so.
stuff. We're going to
And
collab.
we need to stay in contact about all of those all of these ideas that we just brainstormed for the whole world to hear.
For the whole. This was just a brainstorming session forever. It was like this. I don't know that this is a life-changing podcast. It was just like a brainstorming session that everybody can listen to.
Hey, that's cool. Some people like hearing that, Say it gives us makes us more real, really.
Yeah,
The voices
it does.
behind what people listen to just makes us all the more real. We're just normal, everyday people that want to share the love of Jesus with the rest of you guys listening. So
That's right. Yeah. And as always, there's a reason to wake up tomorrow. And if you need anybody to talk to and can't find anybody, I'm your one. So
there you go.
hit me
All
up.
right, hey.
Find me on social media.
Yes. Grace, stay on for just a minute. We're going to close this out. Guys, thanks for listening to Undaunted Pursuit podcast. We're glad you joined us this week. And of course, like we said, check out the music and all these links that we talked about with Miss Grace and Michael Stokes and all that. All this stuff will be in the show notes, so make sure you do that. And also, if you guys want to message us, if you want to get a hold of Miss Parker, then you can reach out to us or go to her website and reach out to her. She would love to hear from you. We would love to hear from you. Our email is undauntedpursuit@gmail.com or mail@undauntedpursuit.com. Like we said, you can also message us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X. Marshall, as usual, I always like to bounce things off of you.
Well, like
here,
Aaron
so
said,
go
we're
ahead.
out there. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We are on, what are all the pages? Hang on, give me just 5 seconds here because I'm drawing a blank. We are on TikTok. We're even on LinkedIn. Hey, guys, we want to hear from you guys. Send us messages.
TikTok.
Reach out to us. Talk to us. Send us emails. We want to hear from you guys. if you don't, if there's something you don't agree with, or maybe something that you just want to talk to us about, as Aaron and I always say, we want to hear from y'all. We want to talk to you guys about this. And heck, maybe we'll have you on the podcast. Who knows? You just never know. Thank you guys so much for listening. Oh, and before we let you go, also you can find us on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and all the streaming services that you can listen to a podcast on.
Yep. Give us a good rating and review. We'll see y'all next time. Undaunted Pursuit Podcast. Grace, thank you again. We'll see you guys.
It felt like falling into a great abyss. I'd been hurt, but nothing like this. I felt my soul breaking pieces on the floor. Oh, there was nothing left worth fighting for. But then Jesus, like a mighty rushing wind, oh, he came rushing in. He washed me clean. But then Jesus drove the darkness from the night. He came and conquered all my fights. He set me free when there was no hope and I had lost all faith. Well, then Jesus, he came and made the way. My world was darkened by the cloud of my own sin. Hell's armies, oh, they were closing in. I was surrounded by the demons of my past.